I was working the night shift at the North American Defense Command when the first blip appeared on our deep space radar. It was the kind of contact you didn't mistake for an asteroid or a passing comet, too organized, too fast, too deliberate. The display bloomed with more targets. Hundreds at first, then thousands. The sensors tagged them automatically. Heat signatures, whole structures, drive emissions. All wrong, all alien. The room went dead silent except for the hum of the consoles, even the chatter between the tech stopped. You didn't need to be a military analyst to understand what that many ships meant. This wasn't exploration. It was war. General Maddox stepped forward, his jaw set like granite. Lock global alert, patch me to every military head on the planet, now. His voice was calm, but I could see the tightness around his eyes. He knew what I knew. Earth had never fought a space war. Not really. And if this was the kind of enemy it looked like, we weren't going to have the luxury of preparation. The first transmission came 15 minutes later. No introduction. No diplomacy. A deep, cold voice that didn't sound human. This planet is claimed by the Imperial Dominion. All inhabitants will surrender or be destroyed. You have 60 of your seconds to comply. 60 seconds. That's how long they gave 8 billion people. I remember looking out the reinforced observation glass towards the night sky. You couldn't see the ships with the naked eye yet, but you could feel it. A weight pressing down like the air itself was warning us. My gut twisted, not from fear but from a slow rising anger. Whoever they were, they thought we'd roll over. They thought Earth was just another rock to add to their empire. They didn't know what kind of people lived here. The order came down fast. All major orbital defense platforms were to go hot. Railgun satellites armed. Surface-to-orbit missile silos keyed in. Even the classified installations, the ones politicians swore didn't exist, came online. Power grids flickered as cities unknowingly fed energy into systems they'd never been told about. The countdown hit 0. Their Armada dropped into high orbit, formation so massive it blotted out constellations. Their lead ships opened fire first. Brilliant streams of energy cutting through the atmosphere like spears of lightning. But they never reached us. I can still hear the sound, the gut-shaking boom of Earth's counter-strike. Kinetic slugs fired at a fraction of light speed punched through alien hulls like paper. Explosions rippled across the sky, some so bright they turned night into day. 100 ships gone in the first 5 seconds, another 1,000 in the next 20. They didn't understand our weapons. That was their first mistake. Their second was underestimating what a cornered species would do to survive. By the time the first minute was over, their invincible fleet was nothing more than debris burning in our upper atmosphere. The survivors ran. No threats, no promises of revenge, just silence. But I knew silence wasn't victory. This was just the opening move. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. The glow of burning wreckage lit the upper atmosphere in streaks of red and gold, drifting slowly as gravity claimed the corpses of their ships. For hours the feed showed alien hulls tumbling like dead fish in the current, some breaking apart in bright, silent bursts before vanishing into the clouds. People down below cheered. In the Cities, strangers hugged in the streets. You could hear it in the broadcasts. Victory fever, the relief in their voices. The belief that we just witnessed humanity's finest hour. And part of me wanted to feel that pride. Part of me wanted to grab a bottle, step outside and scream into the night that we had beaten them. But I couldn't. I was sitting in the command pit, headset still on, watching our tactical feeds while the celebrations rolled across the globe. Maddox didn't smile once. Neither did I. We'd both seen enough wars to know that truth, nobody sends an armada that size without having more to send. And nobody walks away from a humiliation like that without coming back harder. By 500 hours, the analysts had broken down the engagement in forensic detail. The Imperial shields, if you could even call them that, were designed for plasma, fire, particle beams, maybe even light rail slugs. But our planetary defense grid didn't fight like that. We threw pure mass at them. Big, ugly chunks of tungsten wrapped in electromagnetic coils launched at a velocity that made them more destructive than any nuke. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't advanced. It was physics, and physics didn't care how sophisticated your armor was. You take a 6-ton slug traveling at 12 km per second, and you put it into a ship the size of a football stadium. It doesn't matter if you're from Earth or some empire 1,000 light years away, you're not surviving that. That's why they didn't last a minute. But that also told me something else. They'd come expecting to face civilization a century behind them. Maybe two. They didn't expect us to fight like barbarians with space-age clubs. They'd miscalculated, and now they'd adapt. Maddox called me into the war room just after dawn. He didn't bother with small talk. The big display showed the Sol system. Every planetary body tagged with friendly or unknown markers. Earth was lit up like a fortress. The moon bristled with defensive satellites. Mars had minimal outposts, mostly research facilities. Beyond that, the outer planets were dark. They're going to regroup, Maddox said, pointing to the Uit cloud. Our deep scan shows movement, not a retreat. Redeployment. How big? I asked. He hesitated. We can't tell yet. But big enough. I leaned against the table. So they test the walls, find the front gate locked. And now they're looking for another way in. He nodded. Exactly. And this time they'll be ready for our toys. It was then I realized the ugly truth. That first fight hadn't been a war. It had been an introduction, and we just embarrassed the kind of people who burned planets for sport. By noon, the civilian leaders started weighing in. The president's address was full of strong words about Earth's unity and unbreakable human spirit. The UN called for global cooperation, emergency funding for defense, and a diplomatic effort to open channels of understanding with the enemy. That last part almost made me laugh. Understanding. You don't send 10,000 warships to shake hands. Meanwhile, our intel guys dug through the wreckage. Some of the ships had hit the oceans intact. The Navy was swarming those impact zones, pulling alien tech out of the water before anyone with a cell phone could snap a picture. Other fragments came down in rural areas, sparking 100 conspiracy theories before the military clamped down. I got my first look at a captured hull section that afternoon. Up close, it wasn't as alien as you'd think. Metallic composites, modular structure, a lot of design logic we could recognize, but the material density was different. Stronger in some ways, brittle in others. It looked advanced until you realized it wasn't made to survive what we hit them with. The engineers were salivating over it. I wasn't. All I saw was a warning: next time they'd build something that could take our punches. Around 1800 hours, we picked up the first transmissions from outside the system. We couldn't translate the language yet, but the tone said everything. Harsh, clipped, urgent. Our linguistics AI started tagging repeated phonetic patterns, the kind you use when you're giving orders. Whatever those words meant, they were being shouted a lot. That night Maddox pulled me aside. We need to talk about Blackfire. The name hit me like a slap. Blackfire wasn't on any public record. Hell, it barely existed on classified ones. It was a fail-safe. The ugliest kind of weapon hidden in the outer solar system, meant to be used only if Earth was truly facing annihilation. You think it's time? I asked quietly. I think, he said, we don't get a second chance if they come back with real guns. Blackfire was not something you could point at an enemy without consequences. Imagine taking the biggest warhead you've ever heard of and giving it the ability to crack planets. The fallout alone would be biblical. But against a fleet, it was the one thing they couldn't shield against. I didn't answer him right away. Not because I disagreed, but because I knew what it meant if we actually armed it. There's no going back after that. You're no longer defending your home. You're preparing to burn someone else's to the ground. At 2200, I left the war room and stepped outside for the first time all day. The night sky was clear. The burning wreckage had faded to faint streaks, most of it already fallen or pushed into decay orbits. To anyone else, it probably looked like peace. To me, it looked like the calm before a hurricane. And sure enough, at 300, the next alert came in. The UIT cloud signatures had multiplied fivefold. Maddox's voice came through my earpiece like gravel. They're not regrouping anymore. They're coming. This time, there was no 60-second warning, no arrogant broadcast. Just raw, silent movement, the kind predators make when they're done playing with their food. We pushed the planetary defense grid into full readiness. Missile stocks were topped off, orbital rails cycled and locked. Pilots climbed into the cockpits of the kind of ships the public thought belonged in science fiction. We'd learned a lot from tearing apart those first wrecks, and we didn't waste the lesson. As the first contacts crossed the Kuiper Belt, I got my first look at their new designs. Maddox was right, they'd adapted fast. Sleeker hulls, layered armor, no massive, slow-moving carriers this time. Just warships, every one of them built to fight and survive. The analysts estimated another 10 hours before they hit Earth. 10 hours to prepare for the second round. 10 hours to figure out whether the physics that saved us last time would work again. And in the back of my mind, that one word kept coming back. Blackfire. I didn't want to use it. Not because I was afraid of the enemy, but because I was afraid of what it would make us. You can't unleash that kind of power without changing who you are. You stop being a soldier and start being a destroyer, and destroyers sooner or later turn on everything. But I knew what Maddox was thinking. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about sending a message, the same kind of message they tried to send us when they dropped out of orbit. The first time. The kind that makes someone think twice before they ever come back. At 600, the President and the Joint Chiefs joined us in the war room. Maddox laid it out plain. We could meet the fleet with conventional defenses and hope they hadn't completely solved our playbook. Or we could arm Blackfear now, intercept them before they crossed Neptune, and make sure none of them ever reported home. The room went quiet. Eyes turned to me. Not because I had more authority than anyone else, but because I'd been the one on the radar the first time. The one who saw them coming before anyone else did. The one who knew what was at stake. They won't stop, I said finally, not until someone makes them afraid, not cautious, not respectful. Afraid. Maddox didn't smile, he just nodded once and gave the order. Blackfire armed, and just like that, the countdown began, not to an invasion, but to a strike that could end civilizations. The order to arm Blackfire wasn't given lightly, but once it was, the atmosphere in the war room changed. No more political posturing, no speeches about unity. Everyone there knew what we were about to do, and none of us would come out of it the same. Blackfire wasn't a single missile. It was a system, a hidden network of automated launch stations buried in the Kuiper Belt, dormant for decades, cloaked against detection. Each launcher held a projectile the size of a passenger jet, wrapped in a casing of dense exotic alloys and packed with a warhead that didn't simply explode, it collapsed. The physics were ugly. The device created a controlled singularity on detonation, lasting less than a second, but long enough to swallow anything within a defined radius before it collapsed in on itself. Ship's debris, even light signals gone. Not broken, not destroyed. Erased. When the engineers first proposed it, I thought they were insane, but when you've studied alien war records, you realize some enemies don't leave you the luxury of clean wars. The countdown to Blackfire's firing sequence was 8 hours. Our fleet, what little we had, positioned itself along Neptune's orbit, not to engage directly, but to herd the incoming ships towards the kill zone. If they broke formation or scattered, we'd lose the chance to wipe them all at once. By the time their lead ships crossed Uranus's orbital path, we had visual, and they weren't making the same mistakes twice. Their formation was tight, no massive carriers or lumbering dreadnoughts this time. These were wolves, not sheep. Fast attack cruisers flanked by heavier gunships with drone swarms packed between them like a living shield. Their hulls gleamed darker, layered in some kind of adaptive armor that shifted in response to sensor scans. They were prepared for rail slugs, plasma, even nukes. I could almost respect the efficiency. Almost. In the command center, every man and woman was locked on the tactical screens. Maddox stood with his arms folded, watching as our projections updated in real time. Trajectory lock confirmed, the weapons officer said. Range, Maddox asked. 6 hours to Neptune intercept. The tension was a physical thing, thick enough to choke on. The plan depended on perfect timing. If they realized what we were doing and pulled back even a few thousand kilometers, we'd waste black fire on empty space and show our hand in the process. The enemy kept coming. No changes in speed. No deviation from their approach vector. They had no idea. I leaned over the console, my eyes fixed. On the lead ship, its profile was different from the others, sleeker and radiating stronger emissions. A command vessel, maybe. If we killed that, the rest would scatter. Not that scattering would save them. 3 hours to intercept, and the first probe we'd planted in their path fed us crystal clear imagery. You don't forget the first time you the face of something that wants you dead. The alien on the command bridge was tall, all sharp lines and blackened armor, its skin a pale metallic hue that caught the light like polished stone. Its eyes were pits of gold, cold and depthless, and it was smiling. That was the worst part, the expression. Not rage, not fear, not even contempt. Confidence, as if this time the ending was already written. Lock firing solutions, Maddox ordered. The clock ticked down. At T-minus 40 minutes, the enemy's formation began to shift, not a retreat. A deployment, smaller ships broke off and surged ahead, drone swarms fanning out like ink in water. They were scouting, probing for weaknesses. They're going to see the launchers, I muttered. Maddox didn't look away from the screen. Not if we keep them busy. That's when our forward patrol ships lit their drives and dove straight into the swarm. The screens lit up with weapons fire. Missiles corkscrewing through the void. Rail slugs sparking against the drones. Armor, defensive flares blooming like dying stars. Those pilots knew they weren't coming back. Their job wasn't to win, it was to distract, to keep the Imperial's eyes on the wrong threat. And they did it without hesitation. One of our patrol ships, the Iron Wind, plowed directly into the side of a gunship, tearing it open in a silent spray of venting atmosphere. The feed cut out, but the damage was done. The enemy focused on the skirmish, adjusting their formation just enough to keep them in Blackfire's corridor. 20 minutes. The enemy's drones tore through our screen, shredding ships like paper. But every second they spent chasing them was another second closer to the trap. Blackfire launch sequence initiated. The weapons officer called. On the tactical map, 12 icons lit up in the Kuiper belt. One by one they flashed green as systems came online. The countdown hit 0. There was no sound in space, but in my head I swear I heard it, the roar of a god waking up. The projectiles streaked from their hidden stations, vanishing almost instantly as their drives kicked in. No trails, no energy signatures, nothing the Imperials could track in time. 7 seconds later, they hit. The first singularity bloomed like a hole punched in reality. Ships too close simply vanished, torn into nothingness before their hulls could even buckle. Others were caught on the edges, sheared in half as if an invisible blade had sliced through them. The second detonation swallowed the center of their formation. Dozens of ships disappeared in an instant, leaving behind only fragments, too small to register on sensors. By the fourth detonation, the command vessel was gone. No explosion, no wreckage, just absence, as if it had never existed. The survivors broke instantly, their tight formation shattered as ships veered off in every direction, desperate to escape the kill zone. But Blackfire's projectiles were still coming, hunting them down with cold precision. 10 seconds after the last warhead detonated, the battlefield was empty. No survivors, no signals, no debris larger than a fist. We'd done it. We'd erased an entire fleet. The war room didn't cheer. Nobody spoke. We all just stared at the tactical map, the empty void where the enemy had been, and understood what we'd unleashed. Maddox finally broke the silence. Get a transmission ready, shortwave. Burst omnidirectional. I knew what he was doing before he said it. A message. Not to the survivors. There were none. But to whoever commanded them. When the channel opened, Maddox didn't bother with titles. This is Earth, he said, his voice flat, almost bored. Send another fleet. And we will erase it too. He cut the feed without waiting for a reply. The official reports would later call it a decisive victory. The news networks would talk about it like it was a miracle. But I'd seen the faces in that room when the singularities bloomed. We all knew what it really was, a line we could never uncross. Blackfire worked too well. And somewhere in the cold dark between the stars, someone now knew humanity had the kind of teeth that could bite back. The real question wasn't whether they'd come again. It was whether we'd survive the next time without burning the whole galaxy down around us. The thing about annihilating an enemy fleet with weapons that shouldn't exist is that you don't get to pretend it's over. Blackfire didn't just wipe out ships. It made a statement in their language. It said, we're not prey, we are predators too. And predators don't forgive. The days after Neptune were strangely quiet. No ships on the scopes, no strange transmissions, no signs of movement in the outer system. The analysts called it recovery time. Maddox called it the space between lightning and thunder. And he was right. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like the deep breath before the knife slides in. We used the time the only way we could. Reinforcing defenses, doubling patrols, bringing every satellite, railgun, and missile silo to peak readiness. The president wanted to publicly announce our decisive victory at Neptune, but Maddox shut that down hard. You don't broadcast your position to the sniper watching you, he said. And that was that. On day 5, the first signs came in. Not from deep space, from Earth itself. It started in Johannesburg. Communications blackout across 3 districts, power grids fried, civilian comms down. By the time military drones arrived, the streets were littered with bodies, but not from gunfire. No wounds, no burns. Just people collapsed mid-step, eyes open, frozen in whatever they'd been doing. At first we thought it was some kind of biological weapon. But then it happened in Sao Paulo, then Manila, then a dozen other cities across the globe. Always the same pattern, sudden blackout, mass civilian death, 0 signs of a conventional attack. And then we started losing satellites. Not shot down, overwritten. The control signals we sent were intercepted and replaced with a different code entirely. Systems we'd built, encrypted, and tested for decades suddenly obeyed someone else. That's when it hit us. The Imperials weren't going to fight us. Where we were strong, they weren't coming for our fleets, our orbital weapons, or our tanks. They were coming for our people. The blackout sites weren't random. They were hubs, communication nodes, power distribution centers, transit control. The places that kept cities alive, and the deaths weren't deaths in the traditional sense, not yet. The med team said the victims were alive, but their neural activity was scrambled, like someone had taken their thoughts, shaken them into dust, and left the body running on autopilot. I was in the war room when Maddox slammed his fist into the table hard, enough to crack it. "They're mapping us," he said, "not terrain mines. They're learning how to shut us off." The worst part, they were doing it without a single ship in sight. By day 7, the pattern was clear. They were using something we'd only half believed in before. Quantum infiltration. Not hacking in the way we knew it, but manipulating across entangled systems. If even one of our satellites or comm relays had been compromised, the infection could spread anywhere. Instantly. That's when I saw the ugly truth. Blackfire had worked too well. The Imperials knew now that a head-on fight meant losing. So they'd switched to something worse. War without battlefields, war where the front line was inside your own skull. The first time it hit close to home was in Tokyo. My brother lived there. An engineer. Stubborn as hell, never believed in any of the alien hysteria until the Johannesburg blackout. I called him as soon as the alert came in. He answered, sounding calm. Too calm. "They're here," he said. Not scared, not urgent, just stating a fact. And then his voice shifted, not in tone, but in cadence, like someone else was talking through him. "Tell your general," the voice said, "the next time you erase one of our fleets, will erase your species." The line went dead. I didn't tell Maddox right away. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't want that voice, whatever it was, to be dismissed as some glitch or mental breakdown. I knew what I'd heard. We threw everything we had into countering the infiltration. Air gap systems, manual relays, even dusted off old analog tech from the Cold War. But it didn't matter. The Imperials didn't need to touch a system to own it. And then the real blow came. Day 10. Deep space radar picked up something in high orbit around Saturn, not a fleet. Just one object, too small to be a ship, too big to be a drone. It didn't move like anything we'd seen before. Maddox ordered a recon run. The Sentinel, one of our stealth corvettes, jumped in system and got eyes on it. It wasn't a ship, it was a marker, a perfect sphere, black as void, covered in patterns that shifted and rearranged like they were alive. It didn't respond to scans, didn't emit heat, didn't acknowledge our presence. But it was there, watching. When the Sentinel tried to approach, every system on board failed in unison. The crew reported hearing voices, their own voices speaking back to them through the comms, repeating orders they hadn't given. Half the crew went catatonic within minutes. The captain turned the ship around, and the sphere didn't follow. It didn't have to. The analysts argued for days over what it was. A beacon, a weapon, a psychological operation. Maddox just called it what it really was. A flag. They'd planted it there to tell us we were being watched, that there was nowhere in the system we could go where they wouldn't see us. And then the disappearances began. Not cities this time, not blackouts. People, key personnel from every major defense network on Earth gone. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. 1 second they were at their posts, the Next, they were simply not there. We finally caught one on camera. A security feed from a naval command bunker in Norfolk. The officer was mid-sentence when his image distorted, like the signal was underwater. And then he just folded in on himself. No light, no sound. One frame he existed, the next he didn't. That was when I stopped thinking of them as an empire and started thinking of them as something worse. Something that didn't care about conquest in the way we understood it. This wasn't about territory, it was about dominance. They wanted to prove that no wall we built could keep them out. Maddox called a closed session with the surviving heads of planetary defense. The message was blunt. If we stay on defense, we lose. They're dismantling us one mind at a time. We have to hit back. I knew where this was going. Offense meant going into their space, into the dark. The problem was no human ship had ever crossed the boundary of our system. Without a support network, supply lines, comm relays, fallback points, all of that vanished the second you left. So, out there you were alone, and against something that could kill you from halfway across the galaxy. That wasn't a fight. It was a suicide note. But Maddox didn't care, neither did I. If I'm honest, they'd made it personal. I could still hear my brother's voice in my head, or whatever had been speaking through him. So we started planning the impossible. We didn't have a target yet, but we had a direction. The vector of the Neptune fleets. Arrival, the location of the Saturn marker, and the timing of the blackouts. All pointed to one region of space far beyond the Oort cloud. The astronomers had a name for it: Void. Sector 9. A dead patch in the galactic map. No stars, no signals, nothing but cold and dark. We knew better now. It wasn't empty. It was theirs. Maddox ordered the construction of 3 ships, not warships in the traditional sense, but predators. No bulk, no unnecessary systems, nothing that could be infiltrated remotely. Every system doubled with mechanical backups, no AI, no quantum comms, no networks, just steel, engines, and guns. The crews would be volunteers, and we all knew what that meant. No one was coming home. When the call went out, the applications flooded in. Not just soldiers, but miners, engineers, pilots, people who'd lost someone in the blackouts, people who didn't want revenge so much as closure. I signed up too. Maddox didn't try to talk me out of it. He just looked me in the eye and said, "If we don't come back, make sure we take something of theirs with us." 2 weeks later, I stood on the hull of the Vanguard, looking out at the stars from the construction dock. She wasn't pretty, but she didn't need to be. She just needed to survive long enough to reach them and hurt them, because the next move wasn't going to be on Earth, it was going to be in their house. We left Earth without fanfare. No crowds, no speeches. The launch was scrubbed from public channels, buried under weather reports and sports coverage. The only people who knew where we were going were in that dockyard with us. And even then, most of them didn't know the real target. The Vanguard, Iron Rain, and Peregrine were the ugliest ships I'd ever seen. They were all teeth and no tongue. Narrow reinforced hulls, no smooth plating, nothing that could be hit clean. Maddox's design philosophy was simple. If you can't avoid being hit, make yourself so jagged that every blow costs the attacker more than it costs you. Every system was manual. We had no AI, no automated targeting, no networked control surfaces. Even navigation was star maps and mechanical gyros. It was like sailing a warship from the 1800s through space, slow, deliberate, but impossible to hack. The crews had been hand-picked from volunteers, not just for skill but for temperament. No one here panicked easy. No one here had anything left to lose. On the Vanguard, there were 20 of us. Pilots, gunners, engineers, all quiet. All carrying something they didn't talk about. I'd been in plenty of missions before. But this was different. The silence wasn't just in the crew. It was in the space around us. Once you crossed Neptune's orbit, the chatter from Earth died out. No regular updates, no civilian traffic bleeding through comms. Just static and the slow hum of the engines. The deeper we went, the more it felt like we were being watched. Not by ships, not by sensors, just something. Every man on board felt it, but no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. By day 6, the sun was nothing more than a bright star behind us. The cold was absolute. Even with the heaters running at full power, you could feel it in your bones. Like the void was trying to reach through the hole and squeeze the life out of you. That was when the first anomaly appeared. We were tracking our position by dead reckoning using parallax readings from known stars. Everything was on course until the readings shifted. The stars themselves seemed to bend, like we were looking at them through warped glass. The Peregrine reported the same thing. At first, we thought it was a sensor fault, but the gyros didn't lie. Space itself was twisting. Gravitational lensing, our navigator asked. Not from anything we can detect, I said. And that was the problem. There was nothing there to cause it, no black holes, no massive objects, just empty void. That was when the iron rains forward. Sweeps picked up a shape. It wasn't moving like a ship. It wasn't moving at all. It was a jagged structure, kilometers long, hanging the dark like a frozen lightning bolt. No heat, no emissions, but solid. We approached cautiously, guns hot. The closer we got, the more wrong it felt. The structure wasn't made of any material we recognized. It was black, but not the kind of black you see in shadows. It was an absence, like looking into a hole cut out of reality. The edges weren't smooth. They were alive, shifting slowly, almost breathing. That's not natural, one of the gunners muttered. We passed within 200 m, no change, no movement toward us. But as we cleared the far side, every light on the Vanguard flickered. Engines, Maddox's voice came over the intercom. Engines are fine, it's... The comm officer froze, staring at her screen. Sir, we're getting an incoming transmission from inside the hull. That made no sense. The comm array wasn't active, and even if it were, you couldn't receive a signal from your own ship unless something was physically transmitting inside it. The audio came through like a whisper, not an alien speech in our voices. My voice, Maddox's voice, the voices of people on the crew saying things we hadn't said, orders we hadn't given. I didn't wait for it to get worse. Full burn, I ordered. Get us clear of this thing. We pulled away, the Peregrine and iron rain following. The whispers faded, but they didn't stop. Even hours later, I could hear them faintly in the static of the internal comms, like the ship had learned our voices, and was replaying them at random. We didn't stop to investigate further. Maddox marked the coordinates for return. Analysis if we survived. Day 9, we crossed into Void Sector. 9, calling it dark doesn't do it. Justice, out here there weren't even distant stars to orient yourself. The void wasn't black, it was empty. No light, no reflection, just a curtain of nothing that swallowed everything. Behind it, we switched to running lights, knowing it made us a beacon. But the alternative was drifting blind. 2 hours in, the Peregrine vanished. One moment it was on our flank, the next it was gone from every screen. No explosion, no comms, no debris. Just gone. We burned hard to the last known position. Nothing. Not even the faint radiation signature reactor would leave behind. It was like they'd been erased. The crew started whispering about black fire, about whether the Imperials had a version of their own. I didn't disagree. We pressed on, but the mood changed. Everyone was quieter. The gunners kept their weapons trained on empty space, jumping at phantom contacts. Engineers triple-checked every system. Even Maddox looked like he hadn't slept in days. Day 11, the first real contact. It came in the form of 3 shapes. A head lit only by our own running lights. They weren't ships, not in the way we built them. They were organic, almost skeletal, with long, thin spines radiating from a central core. They didn't move like machines. They drifted, swaying gently but always turning to face us. We powered weapons. That was when they moved, not forward. Around, the 3 shapes split, arcing into a formation that boxed us in from 3 angles. The iron rain swung wide to flank them, but one of the things turned sharply, faster than any object that size should be able to move, and cut it off. They didn't fire. They didn't need to. Every console on the Vanguard lit up with false readings, hull breach alarms, engine failure warnings, life support collapse. But when we checked, every system was fine. It was all in our heads, or worse, in the ships. Then the voices came back. Not whispers. This time clear, loud, commanding. My own voice telling the crew to shut down weapons. Maddox's voice ordering full power to engines and retreat. And over it all, a new voice, cold, alien, unhurried. Go home, it said. There will be no more warnings. The gunners hesitated, unsure who to listen to. I ripped the comm panel from its housing and shut it down physically. They're not talking to us, I told the crew. They're in us. Ignore it. Target the core structures and fire on my mark. The first volley hit the nearest one. Dead center. No explosion. It just folded inward, like the space it occupied had been sucked away. The other 2 reacted instantly, breaking formation and vanishing into the void, not cloaking, not speeding away. Vanishing. We never saw them again. The iron rain limped back into formation. They'd had the same thing happen. Voices false. Orders hallucinations. One of their crew had opened an airlock mid-mission and walked out into the void without a suit. No one could stop him in time. We didn't follow the fleeing shapes, not yet. We were too close to the coordinates. We'd calculated the supposed heart of Void Sector 9. If this was their territory, there had to be something here. We found it on day 13. At first, it looked like another void structure, a dark absence in the darkness. But as we drew closer, the scale became Clear. This wasn't a ship. This wasn't even a station. It was a city. It hung in space like a dead world, but it was alive with movement. Ships, or things that looked like ships, moved along its surface. Towering spires rose from the surface, their tips glowing faintly. And all of it was built from that same impossible material, swallowing our scans, ignoring our presence. We didn't have to vote on it. Every man on board knew we'd found what we came for. We also knew we wouldn't be leaving without making them bleed. We didn't get within 50 km of the alien city before the first defense grid came alive. It didn't light up like ours. No missile trails, no blinding plasma bolts. Instead, the space between us began to distort. Our forward optics blurred, then cleared, then blurred again, like the void itself was trying to blink us out of existence. Shields, Maddox barked. We don't have shields, sir, I said, but whatever that is, it's not hitting the hull. And it wasn't. The distortion wasn't physical, it was sensory. The nav system started plotting courses into empty space, insisting we were drifting off course. The Iron Rain's gunners swore they saw enemy ships closing in, but every scan came back empty. They're trying to blind us, I said. Then we go in blind, Maddox replied. We killed every sensor that wasn't hardwired to visual optics and switched to manual controls. The ships bucked under the sudden lack of stabilizers. But at least now we could trust what we were seeing, or thought we could. Up close, the city was worse. Its architecture wasn't built. It had grown. Towering spires curled like the bones of some massive creature, their surfaces shifting in ways that made the eye ache. Lights pulsed beneath the skin of the structures, flowing like veins. The place felt alive, and I hated it instantly. Targets, our gunner asked. Anything that moves, Maddox said. We're not here for trophies. The Vanguard opened fire first, rail slugs slamming into one of the spires. The impact tore a chunk out of it, exposing a writhing mass beneath that oozed some kind of glowing fluid. The structure didn't just take the hit. It screamed, not through space but through our heads. Every man on the bridge flinched, clutching at his skull as the sound drilled into our thoughts. There in our minds again, someone shouted. Keep firing, Maddox ordered. The Iron Rain and what was left of the Peregrine's escort pods joined in, raking the surface with kinetic fire. Pieces of the city's outer shell broke away, spinning into the void, but the place didn't die. It adapted. Spines unfolded from the spires, arcing toward us like the limbs of a predator. They didn't shoot, they latched. The first one to hit us clamped down on the Vanguard's hull with enough force to make the whole ship shudder. I could hear the groan of metal under stress, the pop of rivets snapping. Loose, cut it loose, I yelled. Our gunners rotated turrets and blasted the limb point blank. It didn't bleed. It fractured, splitting into shards that floated away, twitching like severed nerves. But every time we tore one off, two more reached out. The Iron Rain wasn't as lucky. 3 limbs coiled around its midsection and yanked it towards the city. I could see its engines flaring, desperately trying to break free, but the spires were pulling it in faster than it could burn away. Rain is going under, the comm officer shouted. I didn't think. I ordered the helm to bring us alongside and fired every broadside weapon we had into the limbs, dragging them down. Chunks of alien material splintered into the dark. But we were too late. The iron rain was pulled into a massive cavity in the city's surface. And then it was gone. No explosion, no debris. The opening sealed behind it like a mouth closing over prey. That was the moment I realized we weren't attacking a city, we were attacking something alive, something that fed. We're next if we stay here, I said. We're not leaving empty-handed, Maddox snapped. He was right. We hadn't come all this way to turn tail, but every second we lingered. Those spires grew more aggressive there. Movements faster, more coordinated. Then we go inside on our terms, I said. Land a strike team, plant charges, blow a hole they'll never patch. Maddox's jaw tightened. He didn't like it, but he knew it was the only shot we had at hurting this thing where it mattered. The Vanguard swung low over the surface, skimming just above the alien structures. Our gunners cleared a path with concentrated fire while the drop team, 8 of us in reinforced exoframes, locked into the airlock. We launched at 30 m. The suit's thrusters burned bright, pushing us toward an open fissure between 2 curling towers. Up close, the walls pulsed faintly, the surface shifting under an oily sheen. The air, if you could call it that, was thin, cold, and heavy with a smell I couldn't place. We landed hard, maglocks biting into the alien material. The surface flexed under our boots, not solid metal, but something denser, like walking on frozen muscle. Stay tight, I said. Watch the walls. We moved down the fissure, weapons up. The deeper we went, the less light there was, until our suit lamps were the only thing cutting the dark. That was when we saw the first movement. Shapes clinging to the walls like insects. Thin, spindly limbs, bodies hunched and elongated. They didn't rush us. They followed, skittering just out of full view, their eyes catching the light in brief, sharp glints. Contact, I whispered. We picked up the pace, heading toward what our scans said was a central energy source. The passage opened into a vast chamber, lit by the glow of a pulsating core, suspended in a web of tendrils. The thing throbbed in rhythm, and every pulse seemed to make the walls around us shift. That's our target, Maddox's voice came over comms from the Vanguard. Plant the charges and get out. We moved in, laying the explosives around the base of the tendrils. That's when the skittering stopped. They came at us all at once. Thin limbs, too fast to track, slashing at our suits. The first one that hit me nearly knocked me off my feet. My armor held, but the force was enough to ring my head inside the helmet. I fired point blank into its chest, the recoil almost throwing me backward. The thing folded in on itself. No blood, just a collapsing mass of dark tissue. Hold them off, I shouted. The other opened up, the chamber filling with a deafening crack of gunfire. But for everyone we dropped, 2 more came. They didn't scream, didn't roar. They fought in silence, like killing us was just maintenance work. Charges set, our demo man yelled. We pulled back, cutting through the last of them with sustained fire. My ammo counter was down to single digits when we finally cleared the chamber. Detonate, I barked as soon as we were clear. The blast shook the entire structure. The core erupted in a surge of light, tendrils snapping like torn cables. The shockwave threw us into the walls, my mag locks scraping deep grooves as I struggled to stay upright. The walls screamed. Not in our heads, for real this time. A deep, resonant howl that vibrated through the structure and into our bones. We didn't wait to see the damage. Thrusters flared as we blasted out of the fissure and back into open space, the Vanguard swinging in low to scoop us up. From the bridge I watched the wound we'd left. The spires writhed, collapsing inward around the damaged core. Sections of the city flickered, lights dying in uneven patches. We'd heard it badly, but as we pulled away, I saw something. In the dark beyond the city, dozens of shapes, hundreds, all moving toward us. They're calling in the swarm, I said. Maddox didn't hesitate. Full burn, get us out of here. The Vanguard leapt away from the alien city, engines screaming. Behind us the swarm closed in, the void itself alive with their movement. We'd drawn blood. Now we just had to survive long enough to tell someone about it. We didn't need scanners to know the swarm was coming. You could feel them in the way the void seemed to close in, the way the black swallowed the faint starlight faster than it should have. Shapes flitted in and out of our running lights, some small and darting, others massive enough to blot whole sections of the alien city from view. Burn everything we've got, Maddox ordered, his voice low and hard. The Vanguard's drives roared to full power, slamming us forward. The swarm followed, not in a tight pack, but fanning out, boxing us in, herding us like wolves do prey. Range, I asked the nav officer. Closest are 2 clicks back and closing fast. No warp signature yet. They're not trying to outrun us, they're shadowing. That made my stomach twist. This wasn't a chase, this was positioning. They didn't want us dead right now. They wanted us to go somewhere, probably straight home. Maddox must have been thinking the same thing. Plot an intercept course for the UIT relay, he said. We're not leading them back to Earth. That meant heading for one of our deep space fallback points, hidden station on the edge of the solar system where we could resupply, repair, and maybe lose whatever was on our tail. The problem, it was 6 days away, and the swarm was faster than we were. By the time we put 20 km between us and the alien city, the first wave hit. They didn't come in guns blazing. The initial contact was surgical, small hunter-killer craft darting ahead to slice at our flanks. They weren't trying to breach the hull. They were severing antenna, sensor clusters and comm arrays, cutting our eyes and ears out. Topside turrets fire at will, I shouted. The gunners rotated the heavy rails and stitched the void with tungsten. One of the attackers folded in half under the barrage, spinning off in 2 glowing pieces. Another tried to dodge across our nose and got torn apart by a point defense burst. But for everyone we killed, another took its place. The Iron Rain, which had been limping along behind us since the city fight, took the worst of it. A larger craft, all blade-like wings and shifting armor, latched onto its dorsal hull and started cutting into it like it was peeling fruit. We tried to cover them, but the swarm was too thick. Seconds later, the Iron Rain's reactor signature flared, then vanished. No explosion. Just nothing. They're erasing them, the comm officer said quietly. We pushed harder, dumping every drop of reserve fuel into the drives. The hull shook under the stress, panels rattling loose. Maddox didn't care. He kept his eyes on the forward plot, like it was the only thing keeping us alive. By the end of the first day, we'd killed maybe 24 of their craft. The swarm had lost nothing noticeable. Worse, they'd stopped making close passes entirely. Now they were just following, always at the edge of sensors, never committing to a full assault. It was psychological warfare. And it was working. The crew started jumping at shadows. Every ping on the scopes was treated like a boarding attempt. Half the gunners hadn't slept since the first contact, eyes bloodshot, muttering to themselves. On the second day, we picked up something worse, transmissions, not aimed at us but from us. What do you mean from us? I asked the Comtech. She showed me the logs the Vanguard had been broadcasting on multiple narrowband channels without authorization. Messages in perfect human standard. Orders for defense satellites to go into standby for key installations on Earth. To open specific ports in their networks. The worst part, every one of the orders was signed with Maddox's voice print. They're using us as a relay, I said, feeling my stomach turn. Maddox didn't hesitate. He shut down every transmission system that wasn't hardwired into our emergency beacon. That meant no long-range comms at all. We were flying blind and deaf. But at least we weren't handing them the keys to Earth's defenses. By day 4, the swarm finally made another move. This time it wasn't to us. It was to board. It started with a loud metallic clang along our port side, a sound you don't hear in space unless something's touching you. The sensors picked up a contact clamped to the hull just forward of the port. Airlock. They're trying to cut through, the security chief reported. I was already on my way, suit sealed and rifle in hand. 6 of us made it to the airlock just as the first line of molten metal dripped through the inner seal. It wasn't a clean laser cut, more like acid eating its way in. The moment the breach formed, they came through. Tall, thin, all angles and hard edges. No armor, just skin that looked like matte obsidian. Their movements were wrong, jerky and too fast, like someone skipping frames in a video. I dropped the first one with a 3-round burst to the chest. The second took 5 rounds before it stopped moving. The others didn't even flinch when their comrades fell. They just kept coming. The fight in the corridor was short but vicious. 2 of our men went down, 1 dragged, screaming into the breach before we could seal it. I don't know if he was dead when they took him, and I don't want to know. When it was over, the corridor looked like a slaughterhouse. The bodies of the boarders didn't bleed. They broke apart into a fine dark dust that clung to everything. One of the engineers swore he saw it move on its own before the vents pulled it away. We held, but we were shaken. If they'd hit 3 airlocks at once instead of 1, we wouldn't have been able to stop them. Day 5, the swarm finally tightened the noose. The craft behind us began releasing clouds of something. Not weapons, not drones. Just drifting particles that shimmered faintly in the dark. Our scans said they were inert. My gut said otherwise. We went a full burn to outrun the clouds, but they weren't chasing us. They were staying put. That was when I realized what they were doing. They're not following us to Earth, I said. They're marking the path. Maddox turned to me. For what? For whatever comes next, I said. Something bigger. We hit the Orth relay station on the 6th day. It was supposed to be manned by a Skeleton crew of 6, but no one responded to our docking hail. The lights were on, but every viewport was dark. We boarded anyway. The station was intact, supplies untouched, but every member of the crew was dead, sitting at their posts, eyes open, expressions blank. Just like Johannesburg. They've been here, Maddox said quietly. And if they'd been here, they knew this was our fallback point. That meant anywhere we went from here was compromised. We refueled in silence, eyes always on the dark beyond the windows. The swarm didn't close in, but it didn't leave either. It hung at the edge of visual range, waiting. When we finally undocked, I knew 2 things for certain. 1, we weren't making it back to Earth without bringing something with us. 2, the Imperials weren't just reacting anymore. They were planning. And whatever they were planning, Blackfire wouldn't be enough to stop it. We left the UAT relay knowing we'd been tagged. The swarm didn't chase close anymore. They just trailed us, steady and patient, like sharks behind a bleeding ship. Whatever they were waiting for, it was bigger than the city we'd hit in the void. The relay supplies bought us enough fuel to make it back to the outer solar defense line. A wall of railgun satellites and missile platforms sitting just beyond Neptune's orbit. Maddox's plan was simple. We'd cross the line, draw the swarm in, and let Earth's guns do what they did best. But nothing about this enemy was simple. Half a day before we reached the line, our scopes lit up with mass signatures. Not the swarm, these were bigger. Dozens of ships, each the size of a city. Blocks sliding in from deep space along a perfect intercept course. Those aren't hunters, I said. No. Maddox replied. Those are the teeth. The swarm had been a leash. These ships were the hounds. The command deck went silent as the tactical map updated. 3 attack groups, each headed straight for one of the defense line sectors. They weren't here just for us. They were here to break the wall. Communications to Earth, I asked. Still dark, the Comtech said. We can only broadcast a short-range burst without risking infiltration. Then we don't warn them, Maddox said. We light the fuse. His idea was suicide, but the only kind that mattered now. We'd hit one of the lead groups head-on, force them to engage us, and buy the line time to focus its fire on the other. 2. Helm, Maddox ordered. Plot intercept. We broke formation with what was left of our escort, 3 drones from the relay, and a battered gunboat we picked up in the void. The swarm didn't try to stop us. They peeled off, almost as if they were letting us go. That should have been the first warning. The enemy formation ahead didn't adjust. When they saw us coming, they didn't scatter or tighten up. They just kept moving unhurried. We armed every weapon we had, from the heavy rails to the last shoulder-mounted rockets in the lockers. At 30,000 clicks, we opened fire. The first volley hit a forward cruiser, dead on, blowing its bow into shards. The second volley never landed. Space in front of us bent, not visibly, but in the way our rounds vanished. Mid-flight. One moment they were on course, the next they were gone. Shielding, the gunnery chief asked. Not shielding, I said. Space displacement. They're moving the impact point. Before we could adjust, their return fire came in. It wasn't energy beams or mass drivers. It was a ripple, a distortion that passed through our hull like a wave through water. Every console on the deck went black. For 2 full seconds we were blind, deaf and dumb. When systems came back, the gunboat was gone. Not destroyed or erased like it had been. Cut out of reality, we kept firing. Anyway, even when the rails only landed 1 hit in 10, even when the enemy didn't slow down. Maddox didn't care about killing them. He cared about holding them. Keep their eyes on us, he barked. It worked. We closed to knife range, slamming point defense rounds into their hulls. Up close they weren't sleek-like contact ships. They were brutal, blocky, covered in jagged protrusions. Weapons and armor were the same thing. Here, we tore one apart with concentrated fire, its core venting bright white into the void. Another rammed one of our drones and detonated, taking both out in a flash. The enemy finally reacted like they cared. Their formation shifted, closing around us like a net. Maddox grinned without humor. Now we bleed them. The fight turned ugly. We were exchanging blows at spitting distance, every hit rattling the Vanguard to her bones. My teeth felt loose from the constant impacts. The first hit to the starboard side breached 2 decks and took 3 men with it. We sealed the bulkhead, pumped atmosphere out of the section, and kept firing. The second hit shredded our dorsal rails. No time to fix them. The third nearly killed us. A lance of white light, nothing like their usual distortions, punched straight through the bow, gutting forward barracks. The hull screamed as structural supports failed. Get us clear, I shouted. No, Maddox said. His eyes were locked on the tactical feed. One more pass. We dove through their formation, rails, hammering anything in sight. One of our last rockets found a weak point in a cruiser's midsection. The explosion tore it in half. That was when the defense line came into range. From our rear scopes I saw the first volley, a wall of tungsten slugs and nuclear detonations stretching across the void. The lead enemy ships broke under the barrage, chunks of glowing debris spinning away. But they hadn't come to win here. The 2 other attack groups bypassed the line entirely, burning hard for inner system space. The swarm followed them like hounds, chasing after the scent. They're ignoring the wall, I said. They're going for Earth. Maddox replied. We could have turned and tried to chase them, but we wouldn't have made a difference. Our drives were shot, our guns half dead, our crew bleeding. Maddox knew it, I knew it, so we made the only choice left. Blackfire, Maddox said. It was madness. The Blackfire launchers near Neptune were a last resort deterrent. One detonation in the wrong place could wipe out half the defense line along with the enemy. But if the 2 attack groups reached Earth, there wouldn't be a planet left to save. The authorization codes were still burned into my head from Neptune. I punched them in, my fingers steady, even as the deck lurched under another hit. The launchers woke like sleeping giants. 12 warheads lit off at once, streaking toward the converging enemy formations. The enemy reacted instantly, scattering, but not fast enough. The first singularity swallowed 6 ships in a single gulp. The second erased another 4. Third missed entirely, vanishing into empty space where an enemy ship had been a heartbeat before. The rest did their job. The attack group shattered, scattering into debris and fleeing ships. The swarm dispersed, their perfect formation breaking for the first time. The defense line finished the survivors. But there was no cheer on the comms. We all knew this wasn't over. The Vanguard drifted in the aftermath. Her hull scorched, her crew reduced to half strength. Maddox stood at the viewport, watching the glow fade from the Blackfear. Detonations. They'll be back, I said. Not right away, he replied. They've got to think about this one. About what we can do when we're cornered. I didn't believe it. They weren't just going to think, they were going to plan. They'd seen Earth's teeth twice now, and they'd find a way to break them. We limped home on emergency burns when Earth's blue curve finally appeared on the scope. I felt no relief, only the weight of what we'd left back with us, because the swarm had been marking our path for a reason. And somewhere out there in the cold void beyond sight, something much bigger was on its way. Something that wouldn't last a minute against Blackfear, because it wouldn't need one.